Chancellor for Sustainability, Bill Vacco. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try to project and see if I can dial this back a little bit. It sounds a bit hot. Let's see. Check, 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 check. There we go. Can you hear me in the back? Yes? Okay, good. So speak up if you have any trouble hearing me. I'll try to project throughout. And also, speak up throughout the presentation. I'm hoping that this can be as valuable as possible for you. So if you've got ideas or questions as we go through, just raise a hand or interject as we go along. So my agenda for today is to give you a brief overview of the work that the university is doing around sustainability, that our office does around sustainability, talk about some of the progress that's been made over the past 5 years, give you some ideas about how you can get engaged, and then just have a discussion. I'm sure that people are coming to this day today with very different ideas and expectations about what you'll get out of it. So please be advocates for what you're interested in getting out of it, and ask the questions that are of interest to you. So this is a political cartoon about the word sustainability that I think is just totally spot on. It's plotted on the x-axis years with 1950 at the left, projecting out to 2140 at the right, and then the occurrence, the frequency of the word sustainability used in written text. So you can see that there's actual data points plotted. So these are real data points in this political cartoon of the frequency increasing, and it's a logarithmic scale, so it is increasing exponentially. Here we are at present day. So by 2036, if the trend line continues, sustainable will occur at least once per page in written text. By 2061, it will occur once per sentence in written text. And by 2109, we will be completely saturated, and all you'll hear is sustainable, 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 sustainable out of people's mouths. The reason that I like this cartoon is within any field, there are words that become buzzwords and are used and abused. And their use, after a while, it becomes saturated and the words lose their meaning. And quite honestly, I think within our field, within a number of years, we may start to see that entities that do the kind of work that we do start to hang their hats on different words, talk about resilience and a whole range of different things to convey basically the same work, just a continuation of the work. And one of the reasons that I like the political cartoon is sustainability is a huge umbrella, and I think it's pretty critical that as we do the work, as we think about the work, that we're specific about the pieces of the work that we're actually working on. So if we're working on energy, we talk about energy. If we're working on waste, we talk about waste. If we're working on landscape or stormwater management, we talk specifically about those issues. Even though it's within the big sustainability umbrella, we have to be conscious that we don't end up just using buzzwords that pretty quickly lose their meaning. And I think it's also a good framework when thinking about the career opportunities, which is part of the premise for today, is my understanding, is that the career opportunities, few career opportunities are just working on sustainability. They're very focused usually. And I think there's just a small number of folks who have the opportunity, and I feel fortunate to have the opportunity to be able to do work that sits under a really broad umbrella. But a lot of folks that are working in the field or fields that relate to sustainability are much more targeted. They're working on buildings or building science. They're working on landscape. They're working in student education. So that is a framework. So we'll start with a little bit of background and overview, and then dive into the work that's taking place on campus. And again, please feel free to interrupt as I go through if you've got questions. Can I see a show of hands how many people are familiar with the triple bottom line concept? See maybe about a third of the hands in the room. So the triple bottom line is a term that was developed, I think, in the 90s to really talk about, highlight that there is an intersection between traditional business thinking, traditional sort of social, let's see, a social work colleague, so social work thinking and public health thinking, and environmental thinking. The environmental field has shifted a lot in recent years. When I was a student, we didn't use the word sustainability. We talked about the environment, and we often talked about the environment as something that was very separate from humanity. And the shift that took place with the triple bottom line thinking was to say, well, these things are all important and they can coexist, and this is where we should aim. We should try to find the win-win-win, where we can get all three. There's an additional shift that is taking place in thinking about triple bottom line, which is to see the economy and society as nested within the environment. That fundamentally, society is constrained by the resources that we have access to within the environment. And the economy is a social construct. It's something that humanity has created that is also pretty heavily constrained by the resources that we have access to. We've lived through eras, a number of decades, really, I guess centuries, where humanity has felt that we had as much access to resources as we could possibly want. And we're starting to see with huge population on the planet, growing consumption per capita, that there are very, very real resource constraints. Oftentimes, resource constraints start locally. A local population will use all the resources that it has at hand. And that has happened throughout human history. What we're starting to see is as humanity is bumping up against the resource constraints of the globe. So this version of the triple bottom line really is due to this. We live in a physically constrained place. There's few inputs. We have sunlight as an input. There's few outflows. It's pretty much a closed system. And we've got to work with what we have at hand. It's a huge place. If you ever fly around the world, or you have an opportunity, which I love to do, you just explore the world in Google Earth or these amazing tools that exist today, you're struck by how massive of a place the Earth is. Yet at the same time, society is bumping up against the walls of the constraints of the Earth with pending climate change and a whole series of other things. So I want to give a little bit of background on what humanity knows about climate change. One of the entities that is really seen as a leading entity is the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is chartered by the UN. And the IPCC puts out reports frequently, usually every 2 to 3 years, that will update the world on climate science as it's known. So one of the most recent reports put out in 2013 now is saying that it's extremely likely, and extremely likely is 95 to 100% confidence, so this is a high degree of confidence, that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming on the planet. Within political circles, this is something that is highly debated. Within scientific circles, it is pretty much settled. So scientific circles are saying, we know this is important, we need to deal with it. The IPCC also then starts to look at the impacts that are taking place on ecosystems and on humanity. So a couple of quotes that I pulled out. The effects of climate change are already occurring on all continents and across the oceans. So this is not a distant thing, this is today, and it's a set of issues that we need to be actively working on addressing and mitigating. And in many cases, the world is ill-prepared for the risks of a changing climate. At the moment, we're observing a pretty significant drought in California, and we're seeing just how ill-prepared at least that particular state as a microcosm of the world is to deal with the issue. There's mandatory reductions in water use that folks are having a very hard time, the government is having a very hard time to get citizenry as well as businesses to actually stick to those mandatory reductions. We don't have the systems in place to appropriately deal with the consequences of climate change. And then on the public health side, the most vulnerable are the most resource constrained, typically. So there was an article written in 2009 that indicated that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. The effects of climate change on health will affect most populations in the next decades and put the lives and well-being of billions of people at increased risk. The UN Refugee Agency, so the UN agency that actually sees the result of displacement of people that are refugees due to war or increasingly due to climatic conditions, has said that climate change is already occurring and the consequences are absolutely enormous. So the reasons that people would become climate refugees are many. It could be one extreme weather event, so a Katrina, that causes people to have to move from their home. It could be resource scarcity that builds up over time, so limited access to food or healthy soils to grow crops. It could be the spread of disease. So if you think about change in climate, there are certain vectors of disease like mosquitoes that don't thrive in certain parts of the globe, that if climatic changes shift, they will start to thrive in those sections of the globe, and it'll cause for some pretty significant public health consequences and likely climate refugees. So I'm probably preaching to the choir, but with a new group, I always want to at least set a baseline of sort of what is known about the issue, the bigger context that we are working within, essentially. So then when you get down to what's actually being done about it, the short answer is very little, unfortunately. So at the national level, there has not been much action on climate. Obama in the last couple of years has started to really ramp up his engagement, which is great. We've got the Clean Power Plan, which is going to be hotly contested in states all across the country, that is seeking a 30% reduction in emissions from how we generate energy for ourselves. There are some small policy wins. So in the financial collapse of 2008 and the auto bailout, one of the negotiations was increasing the mileage standards on vehicles. And that has a really big impact. You know, you take the public health perspective and you increase from an average of 20 miles per gallon to 25 miles per gallon, you're going to significantly reduce the number of gallons of gasoline that are consumed, therefore the number of tons of emissions that are produced. So there have been some meaningful and important and strategic steps, but still, in the broader context, our country has done very little. And as you're probably well aware, climate change is incredibly politically charged. There seems to be a shifting landscape a little bit as we're seeing some big business players start to speak out and take action. I recently read that ALEC, I can't remember what that stands for. Does anybody know ALEC? It tends to be a conservative-leaning business consortium or organization.
Legislative exchange, something legislative exchange.
That sounds great. Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Probably American, because
Right.
everything's got American in it.
So for years, ALEC has been vehemently opposed to the notion that climate change is caused by humans and it's something that we should pay attention to. And they have started to change their language. And it's been due to pressure from big organizations. So organizations like Google, I think Google in particular, pulled out of ALEC, and they specifically cited that ALEC was not taking this issue seriously. And the bigger organizations are realizing that resource scarcity and increases in fuel prices are going to have significant impacts on their bottom line. So the resource constraints of the planet are going to lead to business constraints for the organizations. It's unfortunate that we had to get to that point where we're feeling the pain before we're taking action, but that's the moment in time that we're in right now. Is more and more folks are starting to feel the pain, starting to come to terms with the realities, and starting to think about what actions can be taken. In the state landscape, it varies dramatically. We happen to be in a very conservative state when it comes to environment and climate issues. There's opportunity in any state. This opportunity has lots of opportunity, or this state has lots of opportunity due to, I think, how far behind we are. I've been engaged with a state energy planning entity. So the governor chartered a steering committee to put together a comprehensive energy plan for the state of Missouri. And I've learned a lot through the process. I learned one of the key things is that we're one of only, I think, 13 states in the country that does not have a state energy plan. And we're one of roughly that same number that doesn't have even basic energy codes for new buildings. And these are small pieces of the bigger picture, but they're a reflection of the policy environment within our state. So this is clearly an aside, but I think there's a role that institutions like ours can play in helping shift the tide on some of the bigger issues through piloting projects, through sharing our successes, and through engaging with other leaders in the state. Okay, so I'll jump ahead to who we are and what we do. And again, please ask questions or interrupt. So the Office of Sustainability is a fairly new entity on campus, and we're charged with working across all of the university's campuses to shepherd the sustainability efforts at the university. And right now we've been looking at 7 different domains. We've been looking at, I'll go through each of these, buildings, community, energy and emissions, landscape, food, waste, and transportation. So we've had a set of goals and initiatives within each of those 7 areas. The role that we play as an office is not actually doing the work of sustainability. It's much more convening, facilitating, partnering to move the bigger picture strategic efforts forward. When it comes down to it, we really are just a facilitator and a convener. There's some work that we do, but when it really comes down to it, the landscape of people doing sustainability work at the university is much, much bigger, and I'll mention a bit more about that in a second. We have a secondary charge, which is to try to connect our work into teaching and research. There's this aspiration that an institution like ours can be a living laboratory on a range of issues, sustainability being one of those issues. So looking at ways that we can partner with our faculty and our students to test new things. So an example of that is, as we're looking to the build out of everything east of Brookings, big underground parking garage, new Sam Fox building, a new engineering building, we're trying to think very expansively about creating a innovative energy system, something that has not been done in other places that would be close to zero carbon energy system. And there's a lot of work that we still need to do to identify the viability of that concept. But what I would underscore is in exploring it, we're really engaging our engineering faculty and other folks who we know can play an important role in helping learn from something that does push the envelope. And then finally, the third aspect of our mission is just basically reaching out, collaborating with regional partners, with state partners, and national partners. So just a quick rundown of our history. WashU, like most other institutions, sustainability efforts, formal sustainability efforts, were pushed by students. So the first formalization that I'm aware of was the founding of a committee on environmental quality in 2001 or 2002, somewhere in there, that was student, faculty, and administrators coming together to start the discussion. In 2003, the university hired a full-time recycling coordinator, which was the first staff position that played a I would say, focused role on sustainability. That said, we have had staff for years and years who have been conserving energy, who have been doing waste reduction and diversion. So this is more about the formalization of sustainability at WashU. 2007, the university hired the first, that wasn't until later, hired the first assistant vice chancellor for sustainability. 2010 was the first strategic plan. 2011, the Office of Sustainability came into existence, and we went from 1 person to 2.5 at that time. 2012, we created a large intern program, and then 2014, we added a 3rd full-time staff member, Jennifer Carter, actually, who's in the front row. So we've expanded, but we are a small entity, and I would guess that our future will be a pretty slow growth, which is why I want to talk about the network of sustainability at the institution. I would don't try to read what's on there because it's more a visual tool. If we're going to succeed, we need to be engaging with leadership throughout the institution, at all corners of the institution. I believe that everybody plays a role in reducing our institution's impact and helping us get to the lower impact future that we need to get to. So as a visual tool, the way that I think about how we work is we're sort of a hub of a big network of leaders throughout the institution, most of whom are doing the actual work, and we're just helping pull people together to have the right conversations, identify where additional resources are needed, and so on. What this doesn't show is there's lots of connections between all of the different entities collaborating on campus. Thinking about opportunities to do more around sustainability at the institution, I don't believe necessarily that the Office of Sustainability is the place where there's going to be a significant addition of FTEs. I think it's much more likely that we'll see integration of explicit sustainability functions, whether it's energy engineering, it's lead consultants on buildings, it's some sort of public health function within the rest of the institution. That's probably where the greatest growth potential is. So the staff roles that already exist at the institution that play a really key role are many, many folks within our facilities groups at both campuses. And there's a whole range of functions. Parking and transportation, the university hired an alternative transportation coordinator 2 years ago. Residential life, a number of staff members are working closely with students on a range of different engagement efforts on the South 40 and in the village. Our various schools have both formal and informal roles. The Sam Fox School most recently hired a staff member who has probably a 25 to 30% focus on sustainability as part of her role. And then our research centers, iCare's Tyson Research Center, the Consortium for Clean Coal Utilization. We really, as an institution, we are a network of leaders who are all biting off pieces of the pie. What's interesting about such a big umbrella and such a big network is that there's such a broad range of skills and knowledge that are required to really excel and succeed. And so I feel pretty confident that, regardless of the background that an individual brings to the table, there's a place to plug in where you will be able to leverage your unique skills and passions to play an important role in the overall efforts at the institution. So I'm gonna jump to giving some background on some of the specific work that the university has done. But as I go through it, again, I've approached this from the framework that this is in large part, Elfrida, about helping people think about ways that they can be more involved in career opportunities. So as I talk about some of the specific elements of our work, I encourage you just to think through what are the areas that connect to you, what are the areas that speak to your passions, where might you apply your skills and your knowledge, what skills and knowledge do you think you would need to develop to thrive in the areas that really speak to you? Do you, as an individual, are you more of a technically focused person? Do you like the big picture? Where do you sit in that spectrum of, I'm gonna sit and engineer a new system, or I'm gonna help guide a process? And then finally, are you more of a process and collaboration leaning person, or are you somebody that likes to work a bit more independently in a focused way? So those are the questions that I hope you'll ask yourself as I share a bit more about the specifics of the work that has been done. Let me full screen this. Any questions before I jump ahead? Okay. So I've got basically a high-level overview of each of the 7 areas where we've worked, and I'll talk about what we've done and some of where we're headed. So in 2010, the university set a goal that all new construction would be LEED Silver certified. LEED is basically, it's a third-party rating system, so you know that a building has met certain green standards, essentially. And we also said we wanted to build our buildings to a specific energy efficiency, 30% more efficient than what code would require. So to date, we have 20 LEED certified projects. We have done very well at hitting the LEED goal with one exception. There's one project that was tracking for silver and it did not get silver. However, in most cases, we've exceeded that standard. We've built 9 LEED Gold buildings, 1 LEED Platinum, the Loftus project, and the Brown School of Social Work building is on track to be our second LEED Platinum project, first physically on the Danforth campus. There's 4 pending projects, and at this point, we've got roughly 15% of the university's overall square footage is LEED certified, which is pretty impressive. This has been about 10 years of work by many folks we've been building a lot of buildings, building new buildings, certifying rehabs to get to the point where we've got that much square footage that's certified. We've pushed the envelope, please.
Who does the follow-up on these buildings in the sense that they require numerous innovations and some of those innovations don't work?
Right.
And I'm thinking particularly of some of the challenges with flooding in the housing in the Loop area. Who makes it good after the fact, after you've gotten it certified and everyone said hurrah?
That's a great question, and it's a good segue into where we're headed. So there's some aspects of flooding that it just tends to be more of a facility solving the problem issue. They need to get in and figure out what's wrong and fix it. What we have not done as well as we should have done is particularly on the performance-based outcomes. So how much energy is the building using? How much water is this building using? We have not come back quickly enough to make sure that the building is functioning as designed. So Brower Hall is a great example. Brower Hall on the east end of Danforth campus, it's a LEED Gold building. It's only, I think, 5 or 6 years old. It is one of our biggest energy hogs on this campus. Yeah, it's a LEED Gold building. You know, how could that be? There were some decisions made during the design process that essentially value engineered out things that would save energy and money in the long run. But it was about first cost versus long-term savings. And in that case, first cost won. The other issue with specifically Brower and energy was when you build a building, you make certain assumptions about how it's going to be occupied. That you're going to have 100% of the lab space occupied with 10 people in each lab. The reality after a building is built can be pretty different than what you assume during the design phase. And unless you come back and you true up the building systems to operate in a way that is a reflection of how it's actually being used, you can end up operating a building a lot less efficiently than it should. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but there's a spectrum of things that we need to fix because they're broken and there's a major problem, and then there's the things that we need to fix because they're broken and they're going to cost us a lot, and they're going to essentially lead to a much larger environmental burden that the university has, and public health burden, and so on. So we have tended to fix the things that, the bleeding wounds we've attended to, and the longer-term diseases we've sort of let linger. And where we're headed is much closer, much tighter performance-based metrics for all of our projects. The university has invested a significant amount in the last series of years in metering in our buildings. So up until a couple of years ago, if you wanted to know how much energy this building was using, you would have to guess. We only had a single energy feed coming into the whole Danforth campus. So just like your house has your single electric account and your single gas line coming in, that's how the Danforth campus was structured: one electric feed and one natural gas account. So there wasn't a way for us to know what buildings were performing poorly. University invested quite a bit in metering infrastructure that now gives us a very clear picture of where we need to be focusing our energy. And that's going to help us a lot to make sure that existing buildings and new buildings are performing the way that they're supposed to. So we're getting much more detailed in the expectations and goals for our projects.
You mentioned earlier that there was not much in the way of environmental building codes for the
Yes.
state of Missouri to begin with.
Yes.
But it states there that it's 30% more efficient than the building codes that were in existence, which I'm guessing would have been 0%. What does that 30% represent then?
That's a great question. So the 30% is not better than the Missouri Building Code. It's better than a nationally recognized energy efficiency code. So it's ASHRAE 90.1 2007. It's a very specific energy code that is used, coast to coast. And within Missouri, I don't even believe you have to build to the baseline code. But what we've said is, not only are we going to build to the baseline code, but we're going to build to 30% better than it. So it's not 30% better than a non-existent Missouri code. It's 30% better than a nationally recognized standard. It's a good catch. So then some additional where we're headed is building science is changing very rapidly, and renewable energy is changing very rapidly. So as many of you probably know, we've got the Tyson Living Learning Center. It's a small-scale building at our ecological research station 20 miles west of campus that is net zero energy, meaning it provides all of its own energy over the course of a year on site through solar. And it's net zero water, meaning it captures all of its own water on site. So rain hits the roof, it goes into a downspout, downspout goes into a big cistern in the basement, and there's a filtration system, so when you turn on the tap, you're actually getting filtered rainwater within the building. So it's hard to think about how you can take this concept and apply it to this, but building science is moving pretty quickly. There's a 5-story commercial building in downtown Seattle that has achieved living building status. So all those things that I just mentioned. Very, very different scale than this kind of 1-story ecological research station type of building. So again, this is part of where we're headed, is really looking at how we can use each project as an opportunity to be at the cutting edge that exists at that point in time. And that edge is always moving, so we're always chasing that line and always trying to make sure that we're building better and better buildings. So I'll jump ahead to community. The main thing that I would emphasize is that, going back to that network diagram, is that the human resources at the institution drive all of our efforts. It's our faculty, it's our staff, it's our students driving all of our sustainability efforts. So we have, when I joined the university, there was not much of a connection between the sustainability functions and the student body. So we've really tried to grow that in the last series of years through a number of programs, and I feel pretty good about the engagement that we have. There's lots of opportunity to keep evolving it, but I feel that we've built a strong collaboration between our student body. On the staff side, if you are a newer staff member, you probably heard about sustainability in your new employee orientation. We're trying to catch people right as they come in to just give them a baseline about what the institution is doing and emphasize that it's important. And this, down on the bottom right, the university has been investing in professional development for staff to really gain much deeper sustainability knowledge. So an example of it is the Sustainable Facilities Professional Training. It's a pretty intensive 6-day training. Jennifer has just finished up her training. I participated about a month ago, and there are roughly 30 staff members at the institution representing all campuses who are getting trained at a much deeper level. So they're starting to have more technical knowledge that they can bring back to their area, whether they're coming from custodial, whether they're coming from engineering functions, project management functions. It is mostly facilities focused because it's a facilities training, but what I would emphasize is that we've got so many human assets, and part of our effort is just to activate them and to make sure that people are connected to the knowledge that can help them excel. On the energy and emissions front, you may have heard that the university, this is a chart that shows our energy use has basically been flat over 1990 to 2014, while our building square footage is essentially doubled. The story that this doesn't tell, which is really interesting, is that even though our energy use has remained flat, our carbon emissions have increased. And that is because we're using more electricity than we used to use. So when we say energy here, we're talking about energy units, BTUs, British thermal units. But we've basically converted electric to BTUs to normalize. But electricity in our region is very, very carbon intensive. It's actually the second most carbon intensive in the entire country. And that is due to how the electricity is generated. We have roughly 76% coal generation within the Missouri generation fleet, which leads to essentially very dirty or very carbon intensive electricity. So there's different stories when you look at this energy graph versus when you look at the carbon graph. As a result of that, we've just gone through a process of updating our greenhouse gas goal. Throughout the last 5 years, lighting retrofits in buildings, boiler replacements, system optimization within cooling systems, we have gotten surprisingly close to our 2020 goal. So we felt we were within striking distance, and we wanted to make our lives a little bit harder. So we expanded the goal from roughly a 14,000 metric ton gap. You don't need to know what that means, it's just this is relative numbers, 14,000 to a 54,000 metric ton gap, because we want to push it as much as we can. And we believe that we can do all of it in a way that is net present value positive, meaning that it will actually be a good use, sort of a responsible use of the university's financial resources. It'll outperform the market. These energy efficiency measures will outperform the market. And then the other energy-related stuff that we've done recently is we put in about 2,000 solar panels this last year. It was the university's first big push into renewable energy. And we'll be doing more hopefully in the years ahead, but a lot of renewable energy deployment depends on state policy. And like I mentioned earlier, Missouri's pretty conservative, so we need state policy to work with us and shift with us so that we can do more renewable energy deployment.
Where are the solar panels?
The solar panels they're scattered on many different properties. So we've got 75 kilowatts or 300 panels on North Campus, 300 on West Campus, 400 going in on the School of Medicine on 4 different buildings. The Family Learning Center, the 560 Music Building. Tyson, we put in a ground-mounted system. It's pretty cool. So it looks kind of like a solar farm. So they're all over the place. And if you were thinking just from economies of scale and smart project development, it's not a smart project to have this stuff scattered everywhere. But the reason that we did it is we were chasing an incentive. There was a state rebate incentive that made it work financially. The university would not have done it if we couldn't make it work financially. That's currently the guidance. We have many competing priorities at the university, and our primary mission is teaching and research. So we need to be good stewards of the resources that we do have. So we had to be creative and ended up with these sites all over the place because that's what it took to get it done. For the next project, we'll be looking at more economies of scale, big sites, like the rest of North Campus's roof. It's a huge roof. There's a lot of potential. Please.
Given the environmental goals, I was really interested, and I'm trying to frame this in the most politically correct manner. How much influence, or to what extent, do you believe that the presence of a very high powerful fossil fuel member sitting on our board of trustees can hinder or even support the advancement of our sustainability initiatives?
It's a good question, and it's a hard question. What I would say is I don't see it in my daily work at all. I think that I have a set of constraints that I've been given to work within. How those constraints are set, that's out of my control. But I don't see it or feel it in any way. We have a lot of leeway within the constraints that we've been given, which, by the way, are very similar to the same constraints that we see at our peer institutions, to be as creative as we can to make stuff happen. Most institutions are tackling the low-hanging fruit. They're tackling the stuff that they can get a payback on because everybody is resource constrained. We just happen to be in a little bit of a challenging situation in Missouri. Our utilities are very cheap, so it's hard to get certain renewable energy or other strategies to compete with them. So I hope does that answer your question? I don't know, it doesn't answer your question. I really, it's an important question, and it's a question that I don't have the ability to answer. So I have no interaction with the Board of Trustees and have pretty limited interaction with the Chancellor. So how the guidance is set it's above my pay grade. Hope that was a politically responsible answer to your political question. So, agriculture accounts for a huge portion of global climate emissions. Some of it is land use change, deforestation to create agricultural space. You probably have heard studies about cow farts. Have you heard this? That the animal industry creates a significant amount of methane, which is true. It's very legitimate. And methane has 20 times the greenhouse gas potential as a molecule of carbon. So methane is significant. So the cow fart thing is actually real.
Is that true of cows that are eating grass, or is it only true of cows that are eating corn?
That's a good question.
I suspect corn, but I don't know for sure.
I believe it's true of both.
Okay.
But I don't know relative.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah.
What's that?
Oh, I just said methane's methane, but if they're eating corn, they're more
Gassy.
gassy than if they're eating grass.
I don't know that to be the case.
That's
I'll take your word for
what
it.
Colin says. Of course, he's, Michael
Yeah.
Collin, but yeah.
Yeah. That's a good example of devils in the details with sustainability. So much of our work is about really knowing the nuts and bolts. So some of the progress that we've made around food, we currently have about 17% of our food that's either locally grown or locally processed. We've set a goal to get to 20% by 17 and then 22% by 2020. We've got the on-campus burning kumquat, very strangely named student micro farm. You can't grow kumquats in the Missouri region, and I don't know why they're on fire, but it's a really, really good asset for our campus community. The students who are involved are deeply involved and passionate about it, and they found a way to use their small plot of land to do outreach to the broader St. Louis community. So each summer they run a summer camp out of their site, and they're teaching kids about growing food, which is really pretty special. This last year, hopefully some of you saw information about the Meet Green Monday campaign. We partnered with an organization, Green Monday, based out of Hong Kong, and founded in part by one of our alums from the business school, to bring the campaign to campus. And the focus was really on just educating our community about the relative impacts of your food choices. Jennifer put together some great graphics that show if you're going to eat a hamburger versus a chicken sandwich versus a veggie burger, here's a relative water footprint and carbon footprint of those choices. So the intent was to just get educational resources out to our community to help people make more informed decisions. And then we have a waste to fuel program. All of the spent fryer oil becomes biodiesel that powers our dining service delivery trucks. Alfreda? 5. Okay, good. So I'll move pretty quickly through these. What I'd say about landscape is we're shifting our expectations about landscape. So for years, humanity has expected that landscape would primarily provide beauty. Yet natural landscapes provide so much more than beauty. They provide a whole range of ecosystem services. So we're, I would say, at the beginning of this shift, but we're starting to shift towards raising the bar of expectations that our landscapes should mitigate stormwater, or they should manage stormwater. They should create habitat. They can play a role in actually reducing the energy use of our buildings through shading. They can sequester carbon within our soils, and a whole range of other very, very important things that we should be expecting from the landscapes that we invest money in and the landscapes we maintain. And just a snapshot, we actually are a pretty denuded campus. We don't have nearly the number of trees as the surrounding areas. So one of the sort of highest level goals is, in about 20 years, we would like to have much more canopy cover, going from about 14% to 34%. I think 17% to 34%. Transportation, I know I'm getting close on the end of time. Many of you are probably fairly aware we have a whole range of programs, and this is going to be an increasingly challenged area for us. With the construction of a new underground parking garage, there's going to be a temporary disruption while construction is taking place. But then thereafter, we're building everywhere where we have surface lots, and we're growing the campus population. So we have a lot of work to do as an institution, but also within our regional context to develop good alternative transportation infrastructure. The Chancellor has been a fantastic champion of getting metro stations at every campus. So West, North, Danforth, and School of Med all have a Metrolink station and Metro bus stops. But we certainly have a lot more work to do working to make sure that the other connections to campus are strong. And then I'll end with waste. In short, we're getting better. So based on waste audits that we've done, we believe that about 2/3 of the stuff that we throw out could be recycled or composted. In some cases, dining facilities, it can be much higher than that. In 2010, we were only recycling or composting about 15%. 2014, we got up to about 33%, so we've steadily grown. This is the growth of compost on campus. We've grown our composting efforts. And hopefully some of you have seen or volunteered for green waste stations. The idea is at an event, so this is an example of our team at one of the events, you can really tightly control the inflow and outflow of material, and in doing so you can get to basically zero waste, keeping almost everything with the exception of a couple of miscellaneous objects that would come into the stream. You can keep almost all of it out of the landfill. So we've done quite a bit in the last series of years, and we certainly have a lot to do in the years ahead. So my closing thought, I guess I would say, and then questions, right, Alfreda, is that the work that we're doing is a continuum, and we are really just at the beginning of the continuum. To get to a place where we can confidently say that we are living in a sustainable world, that's a very far off place from where we are today. And tying back into hopefully you all being champions and finding ways to get more deeply engaged in sustainability, it's going to take the engagement, creativity, hard work, and passion of many, many, many people to get to that point where we can say we are living sustainably. So our work's just beginning. The next step for us is we'll be releasing a new strategic plan within the next couple of months that outline our next steps on that continuum. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I have a question. Any positions that may come across campus, whether it be in transportation or engineering department, will they be identified as positions that are within the Office of Sustainability? Is there some way that we will know that these types of positions are out there and coming available and have to do with sustainability?
That's a good question. I would say not always. In some cases, yes, but in some cases, no. A good example of no is the School of Medicine recently posted a position that does communication and closely works with us on developing a sustainability newsletter and managing a staff sustainability committee at Med. And it was not posted through our office. We tried to push it out when we saw it posted, but it's going to be yes and no. Some will come through us, but most is not going to come through our office. It really will come from other campus partners that are starting to find ways to integrate those types of functions into their work.
To follow up on that, are there key sustainability job skills that
It's a great
you
question.
can give to HR to mark in jobs so they can kind of track sustainability employment on campus?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it depends quite a bit on the role. So
Such very-
in our office, we tend to be more generalists, I would say, more process facilitators. We've got knowledge of the various domains, but I'm not an engineer, so when we get into really deeply into energy and emissions work, that's when our engineering teams at facilities really take the leadership role. There's the other roles, like those engineering roles or the alternative transportation role, that do rely on a pretty focused skill set. So it is so varied. That's why I pose those questions before sharing the information. I think it's important for you, for folks that are interested in getting into this arena more deeply, to know what you're most passionate about and to pursue that passion, because it's very likely that there are going to be increasing opportunities in just about every area that I talked about in some way, shape, or form.
Do you have someone, or is there a plan for doing more outreach in the community? And I know you have the summer program for youth,
Right.
and maybe you're doing other things, or maybe you said it and I missed it, but just in sort of moving policy in a state,
Right.
But also working with different organizations in town to sort of build coalition.
We don't have a tremendous amount of capacity to do that at the moment, so the work that we are doing is fairly small. A couple examples, so I mentioned I participated in the State Energy Planning Committee. There's going to be a limited number of those types of opportunities each year that we really have the time to do, given all the other job functions that we have.
Well, I'm thinking about the jobs possibility and thinking about how the university is very interested in outreach and community partnerships, and whether what you're doing might be a part of that in some way, could be a part of that in some way.
Yeah, definitely. We do have a partnership with the city of St. Louis, looking at vacant land in the city as a platform for creatively rethinking how we build and live in cities. It's easier to think about creating, you know, the next generation city when you've got a clean slate, as unfortunately much of St. Louis is, or not a clean slate, when you've got a lot of vacancy, as is the case in much of St. Louis. It's actually surprisingly harder when you're looking at a city like Chicago that's fully built out, because you've got a lot of infrastructure that you need to work with. So we have worked with the city, and we're going to continue that conversation. We've tended to be a little bit more surgical in the engagements that we have. The way that I've looked at it is we're a small city in a way. Our institution is a small city. So the conversation in partnership with St. Louis to talk about sustainable cities, how we structure cities, how we operate and how we manage cities is a pretty easy collaboration for us. As you get deeper into stormwater, there's hopefully other campus partners can take on those issues, whether it's the environmental law clinic or it's some of our academic units.
Is there a way for you to list on your website volunteer opportunities for the people who maybe want to get involved, staff members who maybe want to get involved, and build their skill sets through volunteering and doing different activities on campus?
That's a great idea. Yes. Jennifer and I will have to sit down and figure out where we can put it, but absolutely. There's, outside of just volunteer opportunities on campus, I wanted to mention that there's a good and growing landscape of people that are doing this work throughout the region. Organizations like the U.S. Green Building Council, Sustainable St. Louis, and a range of other more focused entities that would be great places for people to gain exposure and experience. And also just connect with a network of other people that are equally excited and passionate. So
are people on your staff available for information on interviews in case they want to follow up on this presentation?
Absolutely, yeah. Please consider us a resource. We're easy to find. For me, it's just my last name, Valco at Woostel. Jennifer's information is on our website. And we will soon be posting a position. So Mary Ostafi, our sustainability coordinator, her last day was yesterday. So we'll be posting that position soon. Yes,
You
sir.
mentioned that you have 12 student intern slots.
Yes.
How is that being structured, and are the research opportunities being worked into the curriculum, and would that be in engineering or in social work or what?
That's a great question. So we have, our interns tend to work on the more operational aspects of our work. So they're tackling renewable energy, they're tackling waste reduction. It's not academically rigorous, I would say. We do have a partnership right now. This was the first semester for a class called the Sustainability Exchange. That is, in some ways, it is almost like a one semester version of our internship, but more academically rigorous. Teams of students in groups of 5 work with a faculty advisor on a real world project. And they have to dig in pretty deep and be challenged by the uncertainty of and nonlinear nature of working on a real world problem. So most of the work that we do is not going to be for academic credit. That our students are doing out of our office is not academic credit, it's just paid operational impact reduction. And we're working increasingly with some of our academic units to try to create more experiential ed opportunities.
So who was doing the class?
It was co-created by Pratim Biswas in engineering, Dean Lindsay and Sam Fox, Bill Lowry from political science, myself, and Liz Kramer from the Sam Fox School. So it was engineering, arts and sciences, Sam Fox, and Office of Sustainability.
Okay, and the credit was available to undergraduates in which program?
I think it was cross-listed and it was listed as an I course through the provost office, but it was also, I believe, cross-listed in arts and sciences and possibly also engineering and Sam Fox.
And do you plan to do it every semester?
We do. So if you know students, send them our way. I think we're about halfway leased up. but we've got another half to go.
Okay, I think with that, we want to thank Phil for his presentation.